Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Or if this is your first time here, hi, my name is Carrington. Love for you to hit that subscribe button. If you've been here a time or two but have not subscribed, I invite you to do so as well. Also, if you've been here a time or two, you keep coming back, you subscribed, hi, welcome back. How are you doing? Hope to hear from you in the comments. In today's video, we are going to be ranking, usually I do the last 5 books that I've read, but for some reason I went through and I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 books. 12 books. And we are going to rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite. Usually I try not to ruin books. I'm just going to tell you this right now. I'm going to ruin books. When it comes to like the ending or anything like that, I will make sure I state, hey, this is coming to the ending in case you want to pick it up. You don't want the ending ruined. And then I'll put the timestamp where you can move on to the next video. But I just have to talk about these. So let's go ahead and let's dive on into ranking the last 13 books 13 books, something like that I read. So coming in last place, and this is a huge trigger warning for SA against minor children. So before you're all like, why would you read that? There is a reason, but let's go ahead. We'll dive into the book, and then I will give the reason as to why that is a book that I purchased and read as well. So let's go ahead and let's dive on it. So number 12 is this book called Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. I know what this looks like on the front. It's a place for a button. Okay, I get what it looks like. But anyways, this follows about, so this is actually based on a true story of a teacher, Mrs. Barbara Lefebvre. I'll put her name up there. But in this book, the teacher's name is Celeste. And I will say that there are some topics in here. I think that the way they approach the topic could have been a little bit different. But anyways, it's through the eyes of Celeste. And she is a teacher. She is married to a police officer. She's very attractive, very young. Her husband is very wealthy, comes from a long myriad of of wealth. But her little secret is she doesn't like men that are older. She likes 14-year-old boys. 14-year-old boys that haven't hit puberty. And she works at a school. And middle school. Yes. So it talks about in here, it talks about how, like, what she looks for in her victims. So she talks about how she likes somebody that's a little bit more quiet, reserved, not really going to be someone that likes to brag, doesn't really talk a lot. Talks about how she first, when she has multiple people that she's interested in, how she like narrows it down, what tactics she used. And then, it does talk about whenever she does get intimate with these boys, it gets very graphic in detail. I feel like we really could have done without that. But then it does talk about how one of the boys that she was in a relationship with, she was also in a relationship kind of with the dad, even though she's married. So that way she had more access to the young boy, and the dad was all here for it until he catches them, and then he dies from a heart attack. And then it talks about how eventually, obviously she does get caught. And the way she gets caught is because the boy whose dad died, he ended up having to move with his mom, but he got to keep the property because it was like signed over in his name. And so he got to keep the property. So she would sneak another boy over there. He found out about it, alerted the police, everything like that. So like that's a good thing that happened. She did get caught. There was a trial. She didn't get a very long sentence, and in the end she ends up moving to more of a like a beach area, like a vacation spot, and she preys on like young boys that way, but only like one time, gives them fake names, wears like a disguise, gives like fake phone numbers, just like things like that. Now you're probably like, why would anybody want to write a book on that? No, I get it. I 1000% get it. I am a mom to a little boy. I promise you, if somebody ever did any of this to my kid, I would lose it. Okay? But I also am a victim of child assaults, kind of like these boys, only it wasn't a teacher, it was a trusted friend of my parents. And so as I was reading this, it really kind of made me think about some of the like red flags that were in here that nobody caught, because you want to believe a trusted adult, right? You want to believe that a teacher is there to support, be your friend, help support your children and not hurt them. But, some of the red flags where the dad would come home and there would be the teacher And they would be like, oh, she's helping me study. She's tutoring me. But my question as a parent would be, well, why didn't I know about this? Why didn't I know you needed that much extra tutoring? Why is it she is doing this at home when nobody is here? And why, why isn't there anybody else in the community that can help you? Because I'm not paying this teacher. This teacher wasn't being paid. So why are you just so, are you helping all of these students? Is it just my student? Is it just my child? Just things like that are just kind of some red flags that I, as a parent, would want to, that I feel like I would be like, this sounds a little bit weird. But the fact is that this person's dad was very invested into his child and really thought that that was something that was going to benefit him. So I was just sitting there and I was just reading about how she picked the victims. And in my brain, that makes sense, because for me, I wouldn't have told my parents. Me and my parents did not have a very good relationship. I don't know if they would have believed me, but then at the same time, it's kind of like, why didn't you notice the signs? If I needed to go to the store, this friend was always like, oh, I'll take her. I need to go to the store too. Or one night we went to go see a movie. What was it called? Roadhouse or something like that. I rode with him, although there was a group of us going. Why would we ride separate from everybody else? It was just weird things like that. But they were just like, oh, well, we've known this person a really long time. Why would anything like that happen? So I think I could have done without the intricate scenes, the intimate scenes. I don't think we really needed that. But I think that is it's a good book to really sit there and think about, if something like this, if I walked in on my kid's teacher teaching my kid at home without me knowing, would I raise red flags? Or would I just be like, oh my gosh, well, thank you so much for taking, being really invested into my child? How would you address that? And so I think that's something good to think about. And then during the trial, they did what they did to me when I was a child and made it seem like it was the boys that came on to her, that they were the ones that wanted it. And so she got a very little sentence, which unfortunately for me was very similar. All the while, my mental health plummeted. It plummeted. And to see that this was very common for other kids too, just makes me that much more aware of how, what kind of conversations I need to be having with my kids, what kind of conversations I need to be having with those trusted adults, making sure that my kids can come to me no matter what, letting them know what is appropriate, what isn't, letting them know that even though an adult might make you feel like you're invincible, like you're so special, you're not, this is wrong. So I think that this is a very disturbing book. Definitely not one I would recommend if you cannot stomach something like that. But I think also if you are able to, I think it's good to read and think about, and how are you going to best talk about this with your children? How are you best going to handle something if something like this were to happen? Just things like that. So I know it's a terrible book. I didn't buy it for the sake of oh, I'm so into this. It's definitely just one to really make you think. And I actually bought it because it was really recommended in a book group that I'm in. But of course, a lot of people are don't want to ruin the book, but this was a really messed up book, and I'm a big fan of messed up books, right? I read some stuff where I'm just wow, this is a whole different level. Okay, this is a whole different level. I did not realize it was that level of effed up, but I really am very happy and very excited that I read that, because it really does help me think a little bit more and just be more mindful of the conversations that I'm having, trying to notice any weird signs or anything like that with my own children. So I just wanted to clear that up as to why I read that, but just something to be mindful. It's a lot. The next book, I don't think there's any that are anywhere near as serious as that one. So the next book is going to be this, called The Escape Room. This was very interesting. This was very good. It's a very short read. How many pages is this? I think it's 100 and... Okay, no, just kidding. It has 204 pages, but as you can tell, it's very just short chapters, things like that. Super easy to read. So, how this begins is there's a girl named Alyssa who seems to be very, very popular with everybody. She, she is, like a cheerleader. All the boys think she's cute. All the girls want to be friends with her and want to be her. Her best friends are Sky. So Sky is another boy. He is dating somebody named, what is her name? What is her name? Is her name Courtney? Caitlin. Her name's Caitlin. Dating a girl named Caitlin. Everybody thinks that Sky is really into Alyssa and wants to be more than friends with her. He claims he doesn't, but everybody thinks, oh yeah, you do. Then there's Miles. Miles is somebody that works at the pizza shop with Sky. And so because Sky and Alyssa are friends, they run into each other. Miles asks Alyssa if she would like to go to an escape room, invites her to invite her friends because there has to be 4 people. And he knows Alyssa, Sky, him, and Mint will make those 4 people. And so Mint is the friend. And what's really interesting is that a lot of people think she would not want to come to the escape room because she seems to always kind of flake. But what's interesting is because it kind of tells the story from everybody's side. That's basically what it talks about. But Mint feels pain. So if somebody is standing next to her and being stabbed, she can feel that pain, but she can also feel the pain before it happens. So if somebody is coming and stabbing, going to stab them in the next, few days, whatever, she can feel that. So it's really hard for her to be able to go out in public because she can feel that people are going to be put through pain. And I mean, how could you tell somebody that, right? That wouldn't be possible. But so Mint sees Miles and this girl arguing at the park, and she gets a really sharp pain in her stomach anytime she's around Miles. So she thinks Miles is going to get sick, something's going to happen to her. She just can't figure out why. But then she was trying to figure out why why he was yelling at this girl, and she just couldn't figure it out. She's like, okay, well, that's really strange. So then the night comes whenever it's time for them to go to the escape room, and Sky had told Caitlin that he was going to be hanging out with friends and she wanted to go. So he told her to get there at 9 instead of 8 p.m. because they were supposed to have already been done with the escape room, right? Get an hour. So they should have already been done by the time she gets there. So they could have been like, oh, sorry, you came at the wrong time. You must have misunderstood me, or, oh, sorry, I gave you the wrong time, or whatever the case may be. So they go ahead and they are going into the escape room, and they first notice it's like a doctor's office, and they have to problem solve, figuring out the medicine for the mental illness. And Mint was actually really, really good and really smarter than the people in the group thought she would be. But Alyssa was able to figure out that one med went for PTSD, and the reason she knows that is her dad is a firefighter, and about a year ago, he went to the scene of a fire, and unfortunately, a child and parents had died in that fire. Wasn't able to save them. He tried really hard, wasn't able to save them, so he suffered from severe PTSD from that. So he had that medication. But then you kind of notice as you make your way through that the rest of the place kind of looks like a house. It's like a doctor's office that's attached to the house. Do you guys remember watching The Cosby Show? Bill Cosby? He was a doctor in the basement. He had his office, and upstairs was his house. It was kind of like that, only it was all in the same level because it's a escape room. But then slowly over time, they start noticing something a little bit off. So they're trying to solve the puzzle. They're trying to get clues. Finally, an hour ends, and they're like, okay, well, we didn't make it, so now it's time to leave. But the game person would not let them leave. She would not let them leave. So the door opened, and Sky is trying to get out, and she closes the door on his fingers, smushing his fingers, which are his guitar playing fingers. And so he's in a lot of pain. Mint is trying to use her really smart skills, her health knowledge, and bandage them up. But then it's revealed that Sky, I guess it goes to Mint first. So then Mint's in a room with Alyssa, and she is a little bit creeped out, and then she tries to tell Alyssa that she had seen Miles the other day screaming and yelling, and Alyssa doesn't believe her. So then the lady that is running this escape room calls through the speakers, and she is telling Alyssa that she has to cut all of Mint's hair off. And Mint is just destroyed by this. Why would you cut her hair off? Because she's so self-conscious about herself anyways, that cutting off her hair would make it even more self-conscious, in the fact that she now has to cut off her own friend's hair. Wild. But then Caitlin shows up, right? Caitlin. And the escape room lady takes her and ties her to a chair and is having her watch all of this. So then we get to Sky, and we find out Sky is actually not at all interested in Alyssa. He is interested in Miles, and he is using Caitlin as a cover-up because he doesn't want people to know that he is gay. He doesn't want people to know that. Now, Miles and Alyssa are together in a room because Alyssa doesn't believe anything Mint has to say. She thinks she's intentionally trying to ruin what she has. So they're together in a room, and then that's when Alyssa starts noticing some very interesting details that makes her question Miles as a whole, like makes her question his motives. So then a speaker comes on. The speaker comes on, and go ahead, skip ahead if you'd like. Turns out that Miles actually brought all of them together. He did not realize that the girl was going to take it as far, but the girl's actually his sister. And the girl and him are the two siblings that made it out of the house fire. And it was because her dad couldn't keep going back in, and they felt like he was refusing to go back in, not because everything was collapsing in the fire, but that he just didn't want to, and wanted to punish him by punishing her. But that she had taken it a little bit too far. So it was them. They had made it out alive. Her dad actually rescued the one that's running the escape room, and Miles wasn't even home. He was out late, and he was supposed to be home, but he was like, I don't really care. I'm not coming home. I'll come home when I want. Some teenagery type stuff. And when he gets home, that's when he realizes the house was on fire and they weren't saved. So he was upset about that as well. So Alyssa then stabs him in the stomach. So remember, Mint can feel the pain. She felt that whenever he was yelling at the girl who turns out that was his sister. So he is, slowly dying, and as is Sky now, because his fingers are bleeding so much that he's losing so much blood. So the girl is just like, well, they've already killed my brother. I don't care about the rest of them, and sets the place on fire. And then when she comes back up to watch them all burn, she realizes Caitlin's gone. She don't know where Caitlin is. Thankfully, Caitlin had called 911. They had come, they had arrested her and her brother, and the rest of them, luckily, were all saved. Nobody was hurt, nobody died. But they all made it out. They all made it out alive. And now those two, Miles and his sister, are now going to be facing charges. Doesn't go any farther than that. There's not another book to this. It's just, they're just not going to face any more charges. Next up is going to be, this is called Such Good Boys. This is based on a true story. This is the Jason Bautista, and what was his brother's name? Matthew Montejo. So this is where the justice system, I really feel like, failed them a lot. Okay, so we have to start from the very beginning. So Jason, their mom, got married and had a child with someone else, and that was Jason. And she was very toxic, very volatile to the father. They say the father pulled up to her work and committed suicide with her right there. They can't say for certain if she had anything to do with it. She said she didn't. There's no way to prove it. So they ruled it as a suicide. Although the detectives did say there were some very questionableness as to how true that would be. There was some evidence where it was maybe there's more to this, but above, there was nothing else. Because of that, she hated her son Jason, and she did some very, very abusive things to him. Now, along the way, a few years later, is when Mr. Montejo, who eventually gets married to her, and they have a son Matthew together, also witnessed the abuse and said she was very abusive towards Jason as a small child. She would spank him, tie him down, not let him eat food, just make him clean, yelled at him, belittled him all the time, just things like that. And then it finally got to the point where she was going a little bit insane as well, and he left. He finally was like, I can't do this anymore, and just up and left. And he wanted to take the boys with him, but he knew he'd only be able to take Matthew and not Jason, and he just couldn't do it. So he ended up leaving. Now, a few years after that, now she always had been very, very nice and very good to Matthew. There were a few times she kind of lashed out, but most of her anger was directed towards Jason, because she was still very upset that, one, he had killed himself, and two, all of his money, his dad's money, actually his life insurance policy went to him until he was 18 years of age. But her mental health really started to plummet. And when the trial happens, even family members were asked, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you report anything? And even the family was like, yeah, we failed them. But she started to become very, very paranoid, schizophrenic, to the point where she thought the neighbors were out to get him. There were Mexicans on her roof. There were people trying to break into the home. She never slept. She never worked. They just kept moving all the time. It was just like every few months. There was a time when they were all homeless, living out of the car because she didn't trust living anywhere. And they were going to school dirty, with dirty clothes, smelling bags. They hadn't showered in days, barely eating anything. And Jason really started to resent his mom. Jason then did, move on to go to college. He was going to college. He was working 2 jobs to support the family. Like, he was doing all that he could. But I think that his mom being in that state, and the thing is that their family knew about it. Neighbors knew about it. CPS had been called one time. They came out and they did nothing to help save the boys. So Jason just felt like there was no other options. But his mom had been doing really good after he got the jobs, got them a really nice apartment. She was doing great. But then she started slowly slipping again. And so he told his brother, we need to kill her. Now, both of them attest that it was Jason who had murdered her, and told Matthew to go into the bedroom and just stay there. But then he also helped to dispose of the body and the vehicle and everything like that. Fortunately, a few days later, the body was found, and they had murdered her kind of like The Sopranos, I guess. I've never seen The Sopranos, so I can't say anything. But something like The Sopranos, where like they, in the bathtub, cut off the head, drained the blood, cut off the hands and feet for fingerprints, dental records, things like that, disposed of that elsewhere. And then they were going to dump her in a trash site, but then they got caught by somebody trying to dump the trash. So then they threw him overboard, threw her over a cliff. And it was that guy that had caught them that said, hey, I thought I had seen a body, but maybe I was insane. But no, it was him. It was them. They got a DNA match from the boys. And Jason is going to serve life in prison. Matthew is not going to serve life in prison. He did get a long sentence, though. And his dad goes and sees him every day, but not a lot of people visit Jason because he just didn't have anybody in his corner. He just didn't. So that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate what happened. It's unfortunate somebody had to be murdered. I just really think that somebody should have said something. Somebody should have done some more investigative work. I really feel like this could have been a tragedy that could have been prevented had somebody said something, had somebody done something, and they just didn't. And it's really sad, and that's a true story. It's very, very sad, and that makes me sad as well. Next one is going to be this: I'm a therapist and my patient is the next school shooter. This says this is supposed to be like 6 case files that this person Dr. Harper had worked on. And in the end, they all kind of tangle together. It's about 6 different patient files, but yet all kind of work together. So the first case is about a boy who he thinks is going to shoot up the school. He tries to find evidence of it. He does. He tries to alert the police. Well, then the kid comes back in for counseling one day, and that's when he finds out that there was actually another shooter, and they were already in the library getting ready to shoot somebody while the kid was at this counseling session. It was to kind of turn the thing away. So he thought the kid was just there trying to protect, like he wasn't actually wanting to shoot anyone. So they ran to the library, and unfortunately that's when everything turned around and the kid actually was really involved in wanting to shoot people. I don't know if it's luckily or unluckily. Everyone who was supposed to be shot did not, but the shooters, or the attempted shooters, both did die, unfortunately. And so the guy was then fired from the school, but he did testify in favor of the girl, because the girl did shoot one of them that was in the library, and so testified in her favor. Then the next one is called OCD Rituals. So basically, this man comes in with his wife, and they talk about how he has to do a ritual every 5 minutes, and it's the same one, and that if he messes up, people get hurt. And he like shows on like on their camera system what happens if somebody gets hurt. Well, then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to help you out, and, I'll keep you here. And he sends the wife home, and then he messes up on the ritual, and then they watch the home system, and it looks like the wife is being stabbed. But then it comes to light that actually this whole thing is just like, it's like a cult. You're called investments, and so basically they will use like CIA tactics to make people think like they're in danger and to follow these rituals, and like that makes them do whatever it is that they want them to do. Basically what it was. But anyways, he finally found out that the person that he's married to actually was the one that was trying to make him do the rituals and things like that, and wanted to be like her investment. So he runs away and gets away from her. And then it talks about somebody named a choir boy, and it actually turns out that this is Dr. Harper. His mom had brought him in for a counseling session because he was getting burns around his genitals after he went to choir practice. And they thought it was the preacher, so they arrested the preacher. Well, it wasn't the preacher, and the preacher thought it was the mom. It's not the mom either. It was actually Dr. Harper himself. He was doing that himself, but he didn't want to admit to it because he goes to a church, and he didn't want to admit that he was in love with a boy that was in the choir with him, so he'd burn himself so that way he didn't have to feel any love. So there's that. Then the next one is PTSD nightmares. And this is like an older gentleman who can't remember a lot of stuff. He can't remember things that have happened. And the reason why is because he has this disorder where he can't remember things, and he thinks he's a cow. Unfortunately, there's not really no treatment for it. It's not anything they can do. It just progresses slowly over time. But they thought that he was maybe the zombie killer, because there's like a zombie killer in the area that's like eating people. But it wasn't him. Then the next one is the abusive couple, where one's abusive and one isn't, but they're both claiming that each other is abusive. It's wild. It's wild. So then it turns out that the wife actually isn't abusive. She is somebody with the cult, and this guy is her new investment. So that's what it turns out she's abusive. And then patient number 220 actually is a police officer who responds to all of these other calls along the way, and actually he is in on the cult, and he is actually the zombie killer as well. And he ends up murdering somebody that Dr. Harper is in love with, and then Dr. Harper's in prison for all the things that go wrong because there's no proof of this cult. It's all done on like the dark web, and it's hard to, and they just like move the sites and things like that. So unless you have like physical proof, but they were able to prove that like the doctor like locked them up and like tied them up in his home to like watch them better, because no one was going to believe them if he like called in. So then it ends with him being in prison, and there's a couple other books. There's like 2 other books, and one of them, the next book in line, is about like his prison files. I haven't read that one yet, but I mean, it's okay. It was an okay book, you know. It was like very interesting to like hear of like the cases and like the twists and like the cases like he was working with. And it's a very short read. It's like 140 something pages. It's like a very short twist, and then just to at the end to see how they're all like entwined and interconnected. That was really cool. I really enjoyed that book. Next book is this right here called When No One Is Watching. I'm not gonna lie, I literally made this probably 180 pages. There's a lot more pages. There's like 350 pages in here. And I made it 100 and something pages, and I was like, is this ever going to pick up? Are we ever going to get anywhere? Whew. But basically, this is kind of it's from the point of view of two people. Excuse me. It's from Sydney and Theo. So Sydney, it starts off with they're on this tour, and they're trying to make this tour about how like all these white people are in this area, even though it was historically a very predominant black area. And so she would blurt out these facts, and so the person was like, please stop interrupting. If you would like to make your own tour, you're more than welcome to. So she starts wanting to do research into the tour. But along the way, she notices that some of her neighbors are just up and leaving, selling their homes, that they're being run out of business, things like that, and that there's nothing they can do. So Theo moves in with his, I guess, girlfriend into a home that they buy together. But she honestly wants nothing to do with him. And so he just kind of stays out of his own way. But he runs into Sydney and he's like, hey, I want to help you with that tour. I think that would be so fun. And she's just kind of like not super trustworthy. But then she's like, oh, I need to go get my hair done. So she goes and she buys like some like little, did she buy a wig maybe? Or, no, what did she buy? No, I think, I'm not sure what she bought now. Can't think. But then she was going to Uber down a couple blocks so she could go get her hair done. And this Uber, she's in the back, and their name won't pull up on her Uber. It literally says your Uber ride is canceled, yet this guy pulls up. He like locks the doors in the back where she's at, but there's no way to unlock the doors. All of the little locks have been completely and totally taken out. So you can't unlock the doors unless you are up front hitting the buttons on the driver's side. So she gets like really weird, really freaked out, but eventually, she gets let out. But then she notices that the shop is closed to get her hair done because they can't afford the rent anymore and they are not of legal status. So they were told that they would be deported if they didn't leave. So she up and left. So then she went to this like little market store that's there on her street, and she realized it was closed. So she's like, oh, maybe he's sick, because it's run by this Muslim guy. I think he's from Morocco, I think is what they had said. He's from Morocco. And then one day it opens back up and she goes inside and nothing is the same, and now there's a white store owner. And she asked where the other guy went, and she was like, oh, they couldn't afford rent anymore, so they left. And then some of her neighbors were starting to go missing that never would have. One of her best friends did. And she is trying to keep this house that she has, that's her mom's. But you never see or hear about her mom. But the reason why, so this is called like gentrification. So basically they're trying to move a whole bunch of white people into this area to make it a more affluent area. And the reason is because there's supposed to be this research center that's going to be huge, and it's going to be coming in and taking over where the old hospital is. And they're going to find a cure for the opioid addiction crisis. They're going to figure out the answer. So here comes the end. So skip ahead if you need to. But basically what happens is Theo was at home one night and he noticed that somebody was trying to break into her house. So he calls her, and she goes into like the secret escape that there is, that's in her mom's closet. And when she goes down the stairs, she realizes her friend that has been missing is there and dead and foaming at the mouth. She's able to run away. Theo meets her outside. They start running towards where starts running away, and then they notice the hospital that isn't supposed to be open yet with this new thing. There's people in there and there's lights on. And so they were like, there's tunnels under the ground. Let's go in that way. So they go in through the tunnels, and when they get to the tunnels, they notice their neighbors that have been missing and the shop owners are all there. The people of this Vernon Tech got them addicted to drugs so they could be the first test subjects. Because, ethically, you can't tell people to go do opioids, so you can, so they're literally in this, and so they're trying to release them. Then they finally get up there, up onto the next level, and that's when Theo notices that his girlfriend / ex-girlfriend and her dad were behind this whole thing the whole time. So they like catch the whole place on fire, make it explode. They rescue all the people. It was very interesting. I really thought it was going to be like super boring at first because I was like, I cannot get into this. But eventually it does. And I think that the reason why it was so boring at first is because it's just trying to give you like a lot of history, talk about like gentrification, what that is. But then once it really, the ball starts rolling, the whole book just comes together. So where you're thinking at the beginning of like none of the shit's going to matter, it matters. It's all going to come together at the end. So good. Next up is this book called Pen Pal. This kind of bounced all over the place. It was very interesting. So the very first chapter just kind of starts where this kid is like waking up in the woods behind his house that he's been to a million times, but he's like literally in the middle of the woods. No idea how he got there. When he makes it on his way home, there's a police officer there. His mom's at the table. He comes in and she's like, why would you run away? Because there was a note that said he had run away. And he was like, what? And so he read it. And then he's like, Mom, why would you think I wrote this? My name's not even spelled right. Even though he has known how to spell his name since preschool, very nicely, very neatly, better than all the other kids in the class. But his mom didn't realize that he had spelled his name wrong. So then it goes back to he's in kindergarten and his teacher wants them to like write some letters and they're going to attach it to these balloons and send them off. And we're going to see, and then see where it ends and hopefully, you know, have pen pals back and forth with the people that find them. So he sends off his balloon and he also sends $1 that says, and he puts on the dollar 4 stamps. Like he writes on the dollar 4 stamps. And a lot of the kids were getting like responses back from their pen pals and writing back and forth, but it took him a really long time to receive anything. So he didn't know if maybe it got lost. When he finally gets one, there's no letter and there's no address or anything else like that. It's literally just a Polaroid picture, but it's super blurry. Like he can't see anything. So the kid's like, well, there's nothing I can really write back to him to. So he slowly over the course of the time keeps getting more of these Polaroid pictures and they all seem blurry. So at this point, he just collects them. He just puts them in his drawer and collects them. Doesn't even look at them at this point. Well, now it's the summertime. He has a snow cone machine and so does his best friend Josh. So him and Josh are hanging out and they have a snow cone machine. And then they get $1 that has the 4 stamps. And he was like, wait, I wrote this $1. And so he was telling his friend about it. And so they went into the bedroom and he starts looking through all the pictures. And then he notices that he's in all of the Polaroids somewhere. Because the Polaroids start getting clearer and clearer. And then he notices that him and Josh are both in a Polaroid picture. So he tells his mom about it. His mom calls the police. And so then him and his mom are like, okay, well, we need to move. So they're packing up their boxes and they have a cat that's name is Boxes. And they were packing up so that a way they could move. They're going to move to a completely totally different town. He'd have to go to a new school, everything like that. And their cat Boxes would frequently get out of the house. And his mom would have to open a tuna can to get the cat to come back because that cat loved tuna. That's how you got the cat to come back inside, was with the tuna can. So they were trying to, get the cat to come back in with tuna. It wasn't working. And the cat got out because they were trying to carry out boxes out of the home. And the cat got out. And it went underneath the house. So the mom told her son, like, hey, stay back there. I'm going to crawl underneath the house and I'll get the cat. When she comes back, she's very flustered. She has the cat. She's freaking out. She's like, we need to leave. We have to go. Just leave whatever boxes we still have here. Just leave here. A lot of your stuff is basically stuff that you've outgrown anyways. Just leave it in the box. We're leaving. And they never, she never goes back to the house. So, but him and Josh still spend a lot of time together. And, they spend every single weekend, and one weekend, Boxes went missing again. And they're like, oh, don't worry, he'll return home. But then he was thinking, well, at this point, they're 10 now. So they were in kindergarten before, now they're 10. They just been spending every weekend playing out in the woods, things like that. That he might be going back to his Boxes, might be trying to go back to the old house. So they get there, and Josh is like, well, I'll go inside and I'll see what's going on. There's nobody new is moving in. Nobody new is there. So he's like, hey, all of your stuff is not in boxes. It's all put away because they have walkie-talkies. And the person, through the point of view, they don't actually ever say the name, which is weird, through the point of view of is underneath the house. And that's when he notices underneath the house that someone has been staying under there for a really long time. And then he starts hearing footprints in the house that sound a little bit too big and heavy to be his friends. So he lets Josh know through the walkie-talkie. They end up making it out before the person even notices. But then he realizes that his mom, that must have been what freaked out his mom, is that somebody was living underneath their house. And that's why they never came back. They never found the cat either. After that, Josh and them kind of spent less and less time together. And finally, one day when they were 13 years old, all contact just stopped. Not sure what happened, not sure where he went. It just all stopped. And so he was really sad about that. Then eventually he is going to the movies every weekend. And when he gets to the movies, he meets Josh's older sister there. And he asks, her about Josh. And she says that when he was 13 years old, he wrote a letter that he had ran away, and nobody has seen or heard from him since. And so he was like, oh, that's really sad. So then he asks her on a date, and she says yes. So they go on a date, and at the end, it's only them in the parking lot, and only she can drive. He's 14, she's 16 or 17. And so he's like, oh, I have to pee really quick. I'm going to go behind the theater, and I'll just pull around back. And so then all of a sudden he's back there trying to go to the bathroom, and he hears her screaming. So he goes running, and when he gets there, she had been hit with her own car, and there was nobody else around. So she gets rushed to the hospital. She's in critical condition. She's in a coma. He comes and visits every day. One day she finally wakes up, and he's like, great, she's on the rebound, on the mend. But then the next day he gets a text message from her phone that says, please don't come and see me at the hospital. I don't want you to see me like this. I'll text you when I get out. But she still texts him every day. So this is where the ending comes. So if you need to skip ahead, go right on ahead. But anyways, so it's now coming where he goes back and he tells his mom that Josh had ended up running away, and she said that she had known about that. She had known that and never told him the reason or anything like that. But then he found out that also the girl had actually died, and nobody knows what happened to her phone. Nobody knows what happened to it. But he's like, what the hell? Then why didn't you turn it off? Who's texting me? And he felt like his mom was betraying him. So he ended up leaving the home. He just packed his stuff, left. He got a job where he was able to work construction. And he was asked to do a construction job in the woods that was behind his house before. And that is where he saw the guy that had given them the dollar bill and Josh together. Very recently happened. So, now at this point, he's 17 years old. So Josh would have been 17 as well. And these two are laying in a hole together. And it looked like Josh had murdered the man, but could not get out from underneath him. And so they were buried alive. He was buried alive, and his friend is the one that found him. This next book is supposed to be based on a true story, a horrifying story inspired by true life experiences. So, don't know. So there is this girl named Tuesday. She has an older sister named Audrey, and she has some brothers. Audrey was a very sick kid. She contracted polio. This book is based in the 70s or 80s. But anyway, she contracted polio, so she was sick all throughout her life. She had to have a lot of care. And at one point, her mom had to invest so much time into her daughter's care, the one that was sick, that she didn't really give a lot of attention to the other kid. And so, she was also responsible for helping to take care of her sister as well, even though she was 7 years old. I think 7 or 8 years old. I can't remember. But at 7 and 8 years old, she was like, man, I wish that she had died. And then the flu started going around the house, and her mom would sit there and watch her because they didn't want her breathing to be off because she could easily die. Well, one day Audrey asked her sister for a piece of gum that's in her mouth, so she gave her half of it. And then a few days later, then the next day, Tuesday wakes up and she has the flu, and it ends up that she had given the flu to Audrey, and she does end up dying. From there, her mom is kind of different. She's very, very sad, very depressed, but still very loving to all of the kids. Well, then a tragic accident happens where in the middle of the night, she's like, Audrey, is that you? And comes running out of the bedroom and falls down the stairs and has a very massive frontal lobe injury. And from there, her behavior just was never the same. She would make Tuesday sit in a corner for hours. She would lock her in a room, not feed her. She would humiliate her by chopping her hair into like different size pieces, make her wear clothes that were too small, too short, whatever the case may be, to really humiliate her. And she just could never figure out why. Her dad would send her to live with his mom during the summer, so she had a place to get away from, and then she would come back during the school year. Eventually her grandma dies, so those kind of end, and she's trying her best to try to stay alive and try to understand why her mom doesn't love her. And the dad basically is just like, she's just really sick since her accident. There's nothing that we can, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. Finally, CPS is told, and the mom then acts like this great mom for a super long time. The kids finally, gaining weight again and, dressing appropriately for school, making friends. But then her mom and them all decide to up and move, and then the abuse starts again. Finally, the dad was like, you're going to go live with your aunt. You're going to go live with your aunt. And I think what finally happened is that Tuesday did snap on her mom. And that's when she's like, I can't live with her anymore. And so the dad was like, great, I'll have her go live with my sister. So he sent her out there. A few years later, he comes out to come and visit her. Maybe it was like a year later, comes out to visit her and is trying to ask her to forgive him for what happened. And she wouldn't do it because she said, you had the chance to save me. You had the chance to tell the CPS lady, and instead you yelled at me for telling somebody. So he felt really bad about that. So here's where the ending comes. Turns out a couple weeks later, the dad was involved in a car accident and died. But it looks like the dad didn't even try to brake and literally just ran right straight into this giant like semi trailer and died on impact. At the funeral, she meets her mom. Her mom's very, very nice to her, which she finds very odd. And then she finds out from her dad's brother, who works at a bank in Michigan, that he had been putting away money for her over time, so when she became an adult, she could leave. And so he's like, hey, you're almost 18 now. Give me a call and we can get you that money, help you go to college. And then the mom, after that, really tries really hard to rebuild that connection. And the daughter is like, I can't necessarily forget my past, but I know I can try every day to try to make my future better. And so she's just trying to like help her mom out during this time. But I just felt like this book was just, it was so heavy, because frontal lobe injuries are very much a very real thing, and they can mess up who you are as a person. But at what stake should the dad have been, helping her out? At what stake, and at the end of the day, I can see where it's like, I won't forgive you for what happened in the past. I can try to make the future better, but just know I'm not going to forget. I think that's very strong. I think that's very powerful. So I will just go ahead and put a picture up of the next book. I don't know what I did with it, where I put it. I know it's around here somewhere. I just don't know where that somewhere is, but I know it's somewhere. So this is called Lovesick. This was a very just messed up book all the way around. But basically it is about this guy who is dating this girl, and he realizes that his girlfriend just really isn't in love with him anymore. And he finds out that she is cheating on him, follows him around, things like that. He gets very, very, very upset with this news that she is cheating on him. He tries to, put things so that way, he's like, so do you want this to end? And she is just embarrassed by the situation. She doesn't want to end it because that's going to make it really hard on him. She's trying to like value like his feelings and not upset him too much. But he knows about the cheating. She thinks that he doesn't, but he does. So he decides that he's going to develop this idea, and this is just where things just go down here really quickly. But he pays prostitutes, homeless people that he know have STDs to get a vial of their blood or other bodily fluids. And so he does. And so one night he goes and he picks his girlfriend up from work, even though he was not supposed to. It was supposed to be somebody else. It was supposed to be her side person. And he takes her to this abandoned area in town where there's never any cops. It's overrun with homeless people. So takes her to this like abandoned apartment complex, ties her to a bed, and starts infecting her with the different diseases. Now, slowly over time, you start to see her get very, very sick. The police were onto him for a little bit. Then they cleared him as a suspect. And then one night, the other person follows him, finds out he's been holding her hostage. He kills him, disposes of the body. At this point, this girl's really sick. She has HIV. She has gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, and HPV, which is hepatitis. So then he realizes that like she's going to die. This other guy's already dead. There's not really much left to his life. So he goes and he infects himself. And then once he knows that he's really infected, he goes out and starts trying to infect everyone that he can. He's like, putting needles in his arms and then immediately giving them to like homeless people with heroin for free. He is paying extra money for prostitutes to have sex with him without condoms, escorts, things like that. And finally, at the end, when he thinks he has finally spread as much of this disease as he possibly can, he then, shoots up on heroin, falls into the drinking water supply in town, and drowns. The next book is going to be The In-Laws. This is a very short, sweet, to the point book. Like the writing is really big. Not a lot of. I think it's like 150 pages. Just kidding. I always feel like, only 150 pages, but I feel like I'm wrong. 186. That's close. Okay, that's close. 186. This book is wild. This book is so wild. It is wild. Also, let me know down below if you want me to do my book reviews while under the influence of some adult libations. Let me know. Because I can. I will literally go and talk to my friends about books all the time. They're just like, maybe you should do this for your channel when you're also under the influence, because this is hilarious. But anyways, okay. So Henry is taking Chelsea, his new wife, they've been married for a month, out to see his parents. And they have not met yet. They always, had a reason why they couldn't come out and visit. Basically, they live off the land, right? They are off the grid. So they're driving out there. Chelsea's, of course, a little bit nervous. She wants to be able to connect with the parents. They stop at this gas station, and she notices all these missing people on the board, and like how the gas station attendant literally didn't seem to care at all. The gas station attendant was just like really rude. Then these kids drive up on their bikes and try to like steal her phone. So then they drive the rest of the house. So basically they park this truck next to like this fence where you can't really see it from the road. And they have to walk 4 hours to this cabin. And basically they, all the water that they use is like rainwater they collect. They have their own septic system, compost piles. They live off the land, hunt, grow their own food. They have chickens, cows, things like that, right? Like they're living a good life. But it's only supposed to be for the weekend. By the time they get there, it's a little bit later into like the Friday afternoon, early evening times. And that's when she notices that it seems like Martha, the mom, just does not really seem to care for her, does not really seem to like her. And she's trying her best to like impress her, but it seems like she's very much in love with her son. She loves her son, and not very into her. Arthur she had heard from him that he used to be really abusive to both Martha and him when he was younger. He says that now he's like getting a lot sicker. They think it might be Alzheimer's. So he definitely wanted to come out here, see what he was like. And she started noticing that, like one night, like that night she got up because she couldn't really sleep. She goes out and there is Arthur sitting in the chair, and he goes, "I hope you know how to get back to the highway from here." And she was just like, "What? This is so weird." And then, then they start working out in the barn at all days and hours. And, she's out there gardening, and she is wanting to go to Toronto so she can pursue her love of art. And she was talking to Neil on the phone, and they were talking about how they were going to get together, and, like they were going to go to the same school. So like, maybe we should just like live together. Like we've been friends since we were in diapers. Like, I don't see what the issue is. And then Henry gets a call, and it's like, "Oh, I have to go back home. I'll make it back out here. You'll be fine. I just have to go fix something business-wise," because he has like this large security system business. There's even a large security system that he put in for his parents all over the place, where there's like motion-activated cameras. There is locks on all the doors, windows that set off a loud alarm. And whenever she gets there, Martha is basically like telling her once he leaves, like, "I don't think you're good enough for him. I don't think you'll ever be good enough for him. He deserves the world. He deserves somebody better than you." And she was just like, "Whoa, okay." And she is trying to get, him to answer his phone, and he doesn't. Finally, she starts getting some really bizarre messages from Neil, and she, where he's like really coming on to her hard and heavy, and she's like, "Whoa, wait a minute, we've been friends. I don't want to be a part of this." And he's just like, "Oh, yes, you do." And so then she just like kind of cuts the contact. Then the next day he comes back. It's Saturday evening. He comes back Saturday evening. Sunday comes, they eat dinner, or eat breakfast, they leave. She's excited to leave. They get to the truck, realizes that all the tires are flat, so they make it back to the house. And from there, he says he's going to call a mechanic, and that the mechanic's not going to be able to make it out for a couple of days, but like, that'll be fine. And she goes out to the garden, and that's when she notices a large hole and finds Neil in there. Yes. So here comes the ending. So skip ahead if you would like, if you're planning on reading this. But she sees Neil in there. So she takes, while her husband's in the shower, she takes his phone, realizes he never called a mechanic. So he knows that somebody in the house, or him himself, had slashed the tires. And so she was trying to keep them there. And then he like tells her that, shows her a surprise in the shed. And in the shed is where she can do all of her painting. She can do all of her painting. She doesn't even have to go to art school. They're going to stay here forever. Then she notices underneath a tarp that's in the shed is a box. And inside this box are a ton of different IDs with Henry's name on them. But they're all different last names, different birth dates, things like that. So she has no idea who her husband even is. Then she tries escaping with the help of Arthur. And Arthur then tells her that they're not actually, Martha and him are not actually his family. That he's trying to create his own family, that he will lure people there to try to build this perfect family. And that the reason why he limps when he walks is because he also tried to escape. And he had broken his legs. And because, he wouldn't take him to get medical care, obviously. They just didn't heal right. So she tries to escape, and she ends up having to climb a tree because there's a wolf that's coming after her. She passes out. When she wakes up, she's back in the cabin. Her husband's like, "You just can't leave. I guess I didn't explain the rules to you. I love you so much." And it's basically like, we never leave. We never talk about, any of this. Martha, you're going to call her mom, and Arthur's going to be your dad. And she then basically finds out that like, if she doesn't behave, that she's just replaceable. He'll just kill her and replace her with somebody else. But he really has high hopes that she's going to be the one for him. So then you're probably like, well, where did Martha come from? Is that actually his mom? No. So Martha actually met Henry because he had ran away from home because he killed his parents. He killed his parents for his dad abusing him and his mom doing nothing about it. So murdered them, ran away. She takes him into the home. They fall in love. They move out into this cabin, find out that she can't have kids. So instead of killing her, he's like, well, then you can be the mom, and our relationship will never be the same. So she's really jealous of Chelsea. So then her and Arthur try to escape again. She makes it out. She gets the police to come back with her. And when they come back, they get Arthur. Arthur's severely beaten because he tried to help save Chelsea before. Take him on a stretcher when they get back. Henry's dead. He's been stabbed, but there's no sight of Martha anywhere, or whoever she's supposed to be. I guess her name is Rachel. That's about all they know. But anyways, in the end, she ends up going to the art school, and she's going to have an art gallery, and she invited Arthur. Arthur brings his daughter and his granddaughter, and they thank her for saving them. And then the very last part is this older gentleman is on a date. And who should arrive but Rachel? Rachel is like, we can build our own family. Number 3 then is going to be from Frida McFadden. This is The Inmate. Frida McFadden is a fantastic writer. She's fantastic. So basically this starts with Brooke. She gets a job at a local prison. She doesn't tell anyone, but the inmate, she knows an inmate there. His name is Shane. And the reason she knows him is because she actually put them there. Because as a teenager, he tried to kill her and killed a few of her friends in one night. And so finally he has to come, and he's getting the crap beat out of him quite often in prison. So he has to go see her. And he's like, I know you think it was me, but it wasn't me. And the thing is, about that night, she can't really remember because the person attacked her from behind, and it was pitch black. So she can't really say for certain. But then her parents end up dying in a vehicle accident. She moves back into her home. She had not been there since she was a teenager because that night she actually got pregnant with Shane's child, and her parents tried to get her to get rid of it. She did not want to. So she ended up moving up to New York. They helped pay her bills. She went to college, got her nursing degree, became a nurse practitioner. She runs into Tim, who is the principal at the school that her son will be attending. He was there the night all the murders happened, and he was also somebody that she was grown up with. So it was supposed to be Shane and her, and it was supposed to be 2 of her best friends, and there was going to be a third person. So she invited Tim with. And so when she invited Tim over, and he was there that night. Well, then she starts noticing some just like odd things, like the aftershave he is wearing is the exact same aftershave that Shane used to wear, and that's what she could smell while she was being strangled to death. Then he buys her the necklace that he said he found at a flea market, but it was the exact same necklace she had worn that night, had the missing diamonds, had the same nicks, everything like that she had that nobody could find. Nobody was able to find the necklace anymore. So at this point, she is very suspicious about something with Tim. Now, the part that comes and breaks it is that unfortunately, she goes over to his house for a date. She goes down in the basement to get some wine, finds a dead body of a missing girl who was reportedly dating Tim a few months ago. And he said that it was really nothing. They had only gone on a couple of dates, but she seemed really possessive. But now she was dead in its basement. Then the police randomly show up due to a random tip. She leads them to the body, finds out there is indeed a body there. So they arrest him, and then that's when she realizes that it probably wasn't Shane that strangled her, that it had to have been him. So she testifies against him. Shane is released. Shane goes back to her house to stay. She doesn't tell her son that that's his father. He does not know who his father is. But it seems like her son doesn't really like him all that much. He finds out that his parents left him the home, which is where they died, which is where, the friends and stuff died. He wants to go move back there. He wants to go fix it up. And he invites them out there. At first she says no, she doesn't really want to go back there, but he wrangles the son into wanting to go. So they go out there, and now she's back in that spot where she was almost strangled. And that's when her memory serves her that she had tripped over Tim. Tim had been stabbed. She had tripped over Tim. It was Shane who had strangled her. And her friend that was upstairs in a room with her was murdered, but she doesn't know by who. So then she was like, well, wait a minute. It was just Tim and Shane are the only ones, and me were the only, and that girl were the ones that were still alive. So it had to have been Tim and Shane together. So then she finally figures out the secret. She calls Shane because at this point, Shane and her son Josh are in the woods together, going out there to build a snowman. And she starts trying to run away to leave. And that's when the babysitter for her son pulls up and she tries to tell her what happens. And that's when the babysitter then tells her, yeah, my name's not actually Margie. I'm actually Mrs. Nelson. I'm Shane's mom. Shane's mom was the other killer. She was there that night, but nobody knew that. Everybody thought she was at work. It was Shane's mom. And the reason why all this happened is because Shane's mom was in a relationship with her dad, and her dad was supposed to leave her mom and ended up not doing so and left her instead. So she wanted to pay back her dad by killing her. But then they had set it up where Tim was going to be coming along as well, because they were going to try to pin the whole thing on Tim. So then she finds out what happens. Luckily, she's able to get a gun, shoots her, does not kill her. She starts running for her son. Her son starts running back, says that some snow and some icicles fell on Shane and had killed him. Well, then after the mom finds out that her son is dead and is never going to come back, she admits to the murders. Tim is released. And then, she realizes Tim probably doesn't want to talk to her anymore, and, does try to go back over there. And he very much does actually want a relationship with her. So they start building that up slowly. The very last chapter talks about from Josh's point of view. And Josh said that Tim had told her that if Shane were to ever get out, not to trust him, that he's a very dangerous person. And so he did. So he, didn't trust him. And then he was able to hear a phone call that he had with his mom, basically saying that he had done all the murders and he wasn't going to let her survive. And so Josh hit a tree so snow would fall onto Shane, and then took the icicles and stabbed him to death. We're finally down to the last 2 books. I feel like from now on I just need to stick with my last 5, even if I have to make multiple videos, because it's diverse. Okay, so next up, number 2 spot this is called Don't Let Her Stay. This is a wild book. It's wild. So there's this lady who just has gotten married. They just had a baby together. And he has a daughter from a previous marriage who is now an adult. He's obviously very older than her, very well established, a lot of money. And finally the daughter reaches out and says, after he had said, she had told the dad that if he married her, this new woman, that she would never talk to him ever again. And so he still went on with marrying her. And finally she reached out and said, I would really like this chance to be able to meet my new baby sister. So basically, she shows up, and this is where things go just insane. So Joanne is the new wife, and Richard is the husband, and Evie is the new baby, and Chloe is the daughter. This is the older daughter. So basically, Chloe is making it seem like she's like this really sweet daughter to the dad, always on her best behavior, but is completely, totally rude and throws Joanne underneath the bus, makes it sound like she's crazy, and she basically kind of gets the dad to turn on Joanne. Basically, you'll have to read the rest of the book to just figure that out. But basically, then one night he's getting ready to go and leave for a business trip, and so the daughter basically tells her, listen, you have to hurry up and escape. Whenever my mom died, he's the one who did it. He's the one who pushed her over the railing. And he is also the one who killed my baby sister. And at first, Joanna's like, you're nuts. I think it was you. And then she basically splays out all of these intricate details that so far seem to be coming true, because the dad does return. So basically they make it out, and here's the very ending. You just have to read it to see how all this plays out. It's kind of like one of those books. But here's the ending. Skip ahead if you need to. But basically at the end, they escape. They murder the dad. and they're living together, and the daughter was like, hey, I want you to meet my grandma. And so they go out there and they visit, and finally the grandma's like, oh honey, could you run to the store for us really quick, I forgot this. So while she's at the store, she's telling Joanne, she's like, you need to run, you need to leave. And when Joanne is like presenting her the facts that she said that seemed like it was true, the grandma was like, no. She was sent away where she was diagnosed as clinically insane, and they said that she needed to be locked up for a very long time. But Richard refused to believe that his daughter needed help, that she was this perfect angel, and basically she's trying to get as much money as she can so she never has to work again. So she's like, so if she's living with you, don't let her stay. Basically is how it ends. So it's wild. You just have to read it to like see all of like the things that like she's doing, because honestly, if I wanted to describe this book, I would basically just have to read you the book, because that's how just like intricate the details are, but like they're so important. Like there's so many of them, and all the things that like she does, and how she like twists the story to make it seem like it's actually the dad that did all of these, but how like these like little secret details of like all the things that she does, but then like all the things that Joanne like finds out. It's a very intricate story, but let me tell you, that was so good. That was mind-blowing. That was such a phenomenal book. Seriously, chef's kiss. For one book that I had read from all those 13 books, is called Baby Teeth. Okay, all right. This is kind of similar to Don't Let Her Stay in the way that Hannah, this book is written through Hannah, who is a 7-year-old girl, and Suzette, who's the mom. Now, the dad does a lot of the working. Suzette used to actually be really successful in her job, but the issue is Hannah has just never really talked. She's never really talked. She's never really seemed happy, anything like that. She seems to be the most happy whenever her dad's home and her dad's around. She ended up getting kicked out of multiple schools. And so, Suzette was like, well, okay, I can homeschool her. Her daughter is very smart, learns very, very quickly. She takes her to multiple appointments. She tried to figure out there's something physically wrong with her. Finally, one of the doctors was like, I don't think there's anything physically wrong with her. I think this is like a mental thing, and I think she's going to need therapy. So she makes an appointment for a therapist, and, she's trying to tell her husband all this. The husband just like doesn't want to believe that like his daughter could be, anything like this. Finally, Hannah does start talking to Suzette, but it's in like it's like, first of all, perfect tone, perfect language, absolutely phenomenal, perfect. But says that she is a witch, and like gives like this name. When the mom goes and looks it up, it was one of the last recorded, witches being burned alive at the stake. And she is trying to like tell her husband about this. The husband doesn't want to listen. When it's telling it from Hannah's side, she thinks that like she wants to get rid of her mom. So finally her dad agrees to letting her go to like this school that's made for like behavioral children. And basically she would act out so she could get like alone time in like a quiet room. And then one time she was, in the quiet room with this other boy who wears a helmet because he beats his head against the wall. And this teacher goes to leave to go get a book. And when she comes back, Hannah had taken the kid's helmet off and was barking at him to make him want to hit his head against the wall until he starts bleeding and gives himself a concussion. So they kick her out of that school. Finally, she goes and she starts therapy. And that's when the therapist thinks that there might be something a lot more wrong with the daughter, but the dad still doesn't want to believe it. Finally, the dad believes it and realizes his daughter needs more help when, here's the ending. Skip to the end, or you can just exit out, I guess, at this point. I don't know. But when she tried to catch the mom on fire, when she tried to stab the mom to death, and so they send her to this place for like criminally insane children, and the parents are starting to feel a little bit upset and guilty about it now that they're at home without her, but realizing that life is a lot better than having to always lock doors, worry about things like that. Well, then the daughter calls and is talking and is trying to talk to the dad and be like, I'm so sorry, I promise I'll be a good girl, I love you and mommy. And finally the dad was like, no, you need to stay there. And he walks away. So she's like, don't you love me anymore? And that's when Suzette is like, not enough. So then it ends. The very last chapter is about after Hannah gets off that phone call. She's very mad. She's very upset. So then she is like, I'm going to be the best girl ever. I'm going to be so good here that they have to let me go home in a few months. I'll complete the program so that way I can go home and finally kill my mom so I can have my dad all to myself. Wow. Like the mental and emotional just like turmoil of this book. This book was so good. It was so good. I would just recommend this book 1000%. It's almost a 400-page book, but let me tell you, I was hooked. I was so hooked reading this. I needed to know the whole time, like, what is happening? What is going on? So those are ranking, talking about, review of the last 12 books that I read. This is such a long video. I'm so sorry. I'm literally going to go back to doing 5. Did you guys like where I kind of put the ending at the end? Do you not? Do you guys want me to do this? After having some adult libations, let me know all that down below. I'm really excited to hear your guys' thoughts if you guys would like that, not. So comment that down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, give this video a thumbs up. I love doing reading books, talking about books. I have literally purchased so many books. I'm going to do a book haul some point. I'm going to try to. I really need to, fingers crossed, do a giant book haul for you guys. Let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure you guys have subscribed if you enjoy that. I also do a lot of makeup content, you know, talking about how I do looks like these, things like that. So make sure you guys subscribe, click the little bell. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.